Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV. The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk radio.
Lovely to have you, Ann Widdecombe.
Lovely to be with you.
The world according to Widdy. I think that's got a lovely ring to it, Ann Widdecombe. I really do. I think in a different life you could have taken over the world, my love. You know that?
Well, not at the moment, I think. Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. Actually, in fairness, let's talk about the world situation before we get on to John Bercow. Many of my callers this evening, and I'm quite sure you'll have an opinion on this, are deeply uncomfortable. Obviously, no one wants this to escalate. No one wants the situation in Ukraine to escalate. Most people understand the reasons why we can't implement a no-fly zone, why we can't have things escalate in Russia. But Ben Habib, myself, many people have been making this point that we sort of allowed Ukraine to flirt with the West. We allowed Ukraine we sort of intervened in Ukraine when it came to the revolution of about 8 or so years ago. We have had Ukraine cooperating a lot with NATO, though not as a full member. We've encouraged them to become a part of the EU. And many people have made the point that we are somewhat now, when they need us, we're saying, well, we don't really want to get involved because Russia might retaliate. So here are some weapons. You kind of do it for us. What's your opinion on that?
I don't think we're being particularly weak about it. I mean, we are giving them an awful lot of weaponry. And I would like to see us give much more, but we're giving an awful lot. Now, it is a fact of life that if we impose a no-fly zone and it is violated and we shoot down a Russian plane, we're at war with Russia. Now, no sane person wants that as an outcome. So I think it would be very much better that we continue to arm and supply Ukraine and sanction Russia. And already the Russians are not having it all their own way. They thought they were just going to float into Ukraine and sort of take over in no time at all. They can't even manage an invasion, let alone an occupation. So I think we are in it for the long haul, but I think there's hope.
But a lot of people might be asking, well, how many Ukrainians have to die in order for us to hopefully get our wish that Putin either won't remain as the leader of Russia, or for Ukraine to prevail, when we could be intervening and helping the Ukrainians because we were happy to interfere when, we could have predicted this when we interfered prior to this, and we didn't.
Well, the fact is we are where we are. And if we do intervene actively and militarily with our own forces or with NATO forces, then we are at war with Russia. And nobody has to, really have to think very hard about what that could lead to. So I think we do have to keep our heads, but also our hearts are very much with Ukraine. And I think we've got to go on punishing Russia. We've got to go on supplying the Ukrainians. And we've got to hope, what you mentioned almost en passant, we've got to hope that in Russia, they realise there is only one way out of this. But, that's easy to say. I mean, Putin, the Kremlin, is not exactly a tea party. I think how difficult it was for the generals when they tried to get rid of Hitler in 1944. It didn't work because large tranches of people were still loyal to him. And the problem with the Kremlin is there are an awful lot of people genuinely loyal to Putin. You and I can't imagine why, but they are.
And I suppose there is also the danger, isn't there, that sanctions play into Putin's narrative. I mean, I get what you're saying. We don't really have a choice. But if Putin's narrative to his people is, look, the West hates us, they're all Russophobic, there is this danger that the sanctions will play into that narrative.
Well, and we've already heard a lot of reporting to the effect that there are an awful lot of Russians who believe what Putin is saying. And of course, he's quite effectively limiting contrary information. So I'm sure that when the sanctions do start to bite, the Russians will see themselves as victims. But nevertheless, it's very, very difficult to live in a heavily sanctioned economy. I mean, we're feeling the pinch just as a byproduct of sanctions. Now, if you're actually being directly sanctioned, that's a very, very different matter. So I am hopeful, but I can't sit here and say I think we should go to war with Russia. Sadly, I don't.
No, and I think I'm erring with you on that, though it's just really, really heartbreaking seeing those pictures and wondering if we're doing enough. But you've just alluded to something that I think many people will have been surprised by today, and that is to hear that we're still reliant on Russia for 8% of our oil. Has this crisis, in your opinion, Anne, exposed the level of energy insecurity we have here in the UK, and that perhaps our pursuit of net zero, perhaps our obsession with renewables, has actually left us in a really vulnerable position?
Well, I think there's no doubt about it that it has, and that we've had a fairly crazy energy policy for some time now. I mean, the absolute drive towards net zero, despite the fact that China and other countries are not doing the same, and that we only contribute something like 1%. Of the carbon anyway. That drive towards net zero is completely disproportionate. I'm not saying it's not a good ideal, but it's completely disproportionate to try to do it in a confined amount of time. And then there has been our reliance on other people's energy, on French nuclear, on Russian gas, on other people's energy. Now, if we're to be safe, both economically and strategically, and I say this in my Express column tomorrow, very good column every Wednesday, if we're to be safe, then we've got to become pretty well self-sufficient in energy.
And it seems decidedly, I mean, I'm really worried, as someone who's been sort of true blue all my life, I didn't vote for Boris Johnson because I'm really worried about the direction of the Conservative Party. I mean, I often joke, I call him the best Labour Prime Minister that has been in office for a while, because he doesn't seem. I think he's been quite impressive early on Ukraine, but certainly when it comes to things like energy policy, things like imposing taxes, he seems to have lost his way as a Conservative.
I agree entirely. The essence of being a Conservative is to believe in low tax and low spend, and not the exact reverse, which is what policy he has introduced. There are all manner of things that could be done with VAT, for example, but there's a complete foot dragging about it. But there is also this huge level of incompetence, which is what is. I mean, look at the refugee operation, which Britain is mounting, in inverted commas, to help the Ukrainians. Reporters go over there and we're being told, yes, there's an operation and they're all prepared at Calais. And they go over to Calais, there's no operation at all. The poor souls are being sent to Paris. I'm not even certain what's happening there.
And why is that? I mean, do you think, because you must have encountered Boris in your political life, is it that he's just not across detail? Is it that he doesn't command, I'm a great fan of Thatcher and obviously, she gave anyone the hairdryer treatment that wasn't across their brief. Is it that's lacking from Boris?
There is an approach which says, and I think this is Boris's approach, this is what we're going to do, now go away and do it. But if you're going to take that approach, you've got to make sure you're following up, or that somebody on your behalf is following up to make sure that it is actually being done. Now, the thing about the refugees that I've just commented on, we had this with the Afghan interpreters crisis, not so very long ago. And we saw the complete ineptitude then and the huge gap between the theory, which was good, and the practice, which was hopeless. And now we've got exactly the same thing with the Ukrainian refugees. Great theoretical operation. In practice, it's a couple of officials standing around doing nothing.
Well, I mean, OK, talking about perhaps someone who can talk the talk but can't quite walk the walk, many people might be saying that as their analysis of John Bercow this evening. A serial bully, apparently, banned now from the House of Commons, thrown out of his party. What do you have to say about that, Ann Widdecombe?
Well, first of all, let me say, just in the interest of justice, and for no other reason, not because I want to stand up for Bercow, but in the interest of justice, I believe he should have the full right of appeal. And I think we should have a legal eagle examining very carefully where he says the evidence was fallacious and just wasn't properly examined. So I think he should have that right of appeal. But if that appeal fails, then I think that it's a very sad day. It's a sad day for the House of Commons. It's obviously a sad day for him. But let's face it, first of all, he didn't join the Labour Party until after he ceased to be Speaker anyway. So it's not as if he's being thrown out of a party that he's been in all his life. And secondly, he hasn't been banned physically from ever setting foot in the House of Commons. He's been banned from holding a Commons pass, which would give him an automatic right of entry. But it's a sad day. I mean, for a speaker to be thus sanctioned.
Do you think that what we are reading, if it is to be believed, and I take what you're saying, that he has the right to and he does deny a lot of what is said, but do you think any of that sort of personality trait spilled over into how he dealt with the House as Speaker sometimes?
Oh, I think undeniably, and I don't think his best friends could deny it, he was hugely biased over Brexit, and he let it show. And he used parliamentary procedures. I mean, one day he would say, I'm bound by precedent, and the next day he would say, well, precedent's any guidance, depending on which way he wanted to go. And I don't think anybody could defend him against that charge. He was not the most impartial of speakers. I used to like the guy who was working in my Home Office team at one point, and I never had a problem with him, but undeniably, a lot of people do.
Do you know, Ann Widdecombe, I never ask you a question and not get a full and frank answer. It's a joy. Thank you for talking to us tonight here on Talk Radio. Former Conservative Brexit Party MEP Ann Widdecombe.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk Radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV. The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.